there was a request to have members of the administration present and to respond to a couple of questions that some members of the body have. We placed those calls. They have indicated that they'll be here. Ms. Lou Perez is here already. We expect Mr. Gary Hiles, who's the chief economist at the Department of Labor, and Ms. Bertha Duenas, the director of the Bureau of Budget and Management, has also indicated that she will be present this morning. They're not here at this time, and I wanted to advise the body, though, that we have made the contacts, and we will wait for them to have these other members of the body come. The other thing I wanted to point out, ladies and gentlemen, while we're waiting perhaps, is that in these revenue numbers, all of the information that were used to come and arrive at these projections are available to you, your staff, and any other individual you may wish to have review these numbers. You can find them, of course, in your office probably, because each senatorial office, as I know mine does, gets the revenue projection numbers and the financial statements. In addition to that, because the legislature has over the years actually passed legislation requiring these reports to be accessible to not only the legislature, but the members of the public, you can find these reports online. So if you go online to any of the government agencies, Department of Administration has most of the financial reports, the Public Auditor's Office has the audits online listed there, and of course the Governor's Office has links to projects, contracts, and other factors affecting, that would play a role in affecting the deliberations in here. So we're going to break and wait for the two additional members of the administration, but I do want to encourage all of you right now to use the time between now and when they arrive to go to your office, call your staff, have them pull out those forms and reports, because they are there. And the questions, and maybe formulate your questions right now so that when they come here, we can actually begin, and rather than, kind of feeling each other out, we know exactly what we want, the information we need in order to make a decision. The other information I wanted to impart, of course, is that the bill it has been accepted and adopted by the body. We are going through the bill in a section by section, and because the bill has been adopted, as I mentioned yesterday, in the discussion on that section, then the motion would be to amend or delete. So just wanted to reiterate that. So get out your calculators, do your calculations, and prepare your amendments if that's your intention, and we will proceed as soon as we get those individuals here. All right. Thank you. We're in recess until they return. Glenn. Okay. Thank you very much. The Committee of the Whole is back in session. We were able, of course, to get the representatives of the administration to respond to questions that the body may have. We have with us this morning Ms. Bertha Duenas, the Director of the Bureau of Budget and Management, and of course, Ms. Lou Perez, the Director of Administration. I want to say that it is probably these two individuals that keep the government afloat. Lou with just incredible cash management, expenditure control, and so forth, and it's just been she's done an incredible job. I want to give her that credit. And Bertha, nobody likes her, so that speaks to you about how what kind of allotment control is being exercised in this administration. But actually, everybody likes her because she gives them exactly what they need, and I think they understand, exactly what the resources of the government are going through. So when we broke, we had Senator Calvo, and then I see Senator Tenorio's hand, so I do see that. Again, we are on the revenue section. The amendment would be to, the action that the body will is available for consideration would be to amend or delete the revenue, that section, any area of that section. There's a 5-minute discussion, and we'll recognize you, and then you can discuss and ask questions. As I mentioned earlier, the 5 minutes is inclusive of the responses. And we'll start with Senator Calvo and then Senator Tenorio. I see his hand was up. Okay? So Senator Calvo, by the way, I just wanted to clarify, Senator Calvo in yesterday, when we were discussing the model, had a question on the effect of using the audited financial statement net of provision for refunds when we took the revenue for 07 and 08 and then did our projection for 09, what the effect of using the audited financial statements on revenues and using the actual financial transactions for those areas of income tax and GRT. We did that for ourselves basically last night to get a better sense of comfort for what that difference would be. The difference and the variance between using the audited financial statement revenues and tax receipts as a percent relative to the overall revenue of $511 million for FY 2009 is using an average to FY 09 using, this is using 3 years is 0.41% is the variance between the actual financial statements and the actuals. Using an average to 3 for the projection, to 2, the difference is 0.2% of the variance between using actual and using financial. So I just wanted to let the body know when Senator Calvo asked the question that is the effect of using one versus the other. Senator Calvo, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to also welcome Bertha and Lou. Thank you so much for participating in here. Again, you were very helpful also in my term as Ways and Means Chair. Lou and Berth, you know that we're some interesting times here, and again, if you kind of look at what is occurring in the island of Guam, there's a similarity with what you see in the United States, where you have, again, massive injection of capital into the economy through the economic stimulus package of President Obama. I think already you're looking at about $3 trillion has been injected. At the same time, we understand that the natural dynamics of the economy has been going down. That's why, again, there is some major challenges to state and federal government, because you have the tax revenues in the states and the federal government that are not, again, they are still going down, and that is why they're having some major issues such as budget deficits expanding. In similar light, you look at the island of Guam, similar scenario but much smaller. starting in January when, Bert, when you provided the budget with the revenue estimates and towards the public hearing for the budget in June, and of course now, 2 months later, things have occurred. Both sides similar. You have a real estate market that contracted about 300% I think original highs of the previous year is close to 700 million, and now we're looking at about 200 to 300 million in real estate transactions. So a reduction of between $200 and $300 million in economic activity in one particular sector. As the first 3 months or 4 months of the fiscal year occurred, there were reductions in tourism, but with the reductions in tourism, they kind of went a little bit faster, I think, summertime. And I think it was part of the economic recession, but with the swine flu. So, again, you're looking at double-digit, close to 20 to 30% reductions in tourism for the summer months. There are some estimates now from tourism levels about 1.2 to 1 million for this fiscal year, for this calendar year. Looking at a QMark poll, or QMark research, the average spend on island for a tourist is about $638 per tourist. And if we are to hit a million tourists, that would have an impact of about $127 million in reduced spending on Guam. If you're looking at the total spend for tourism, including prepaid, such as the airfare, you're looking at about $1,100 per tourist. That's about $227 million. So there's certain areas that you're seeing reductions in cash coming either directly to the economy or through certain companies such as Japan Airlines or Continental, which is kind of secondary. And I guess from my point of view, you also have injected capital from bond proceeds, Legion, EITC, COLA, and also similar amounts of revenues coming in. And with that, it kind of has a complicated picture. So that's where I guess I'm going to ask some questions to, first of all, with Bertha and then maybe with Lou. Because of this complex situation, and again, looking at the methodology of calculation-based revenues, based on the documents distributed yesterday, the method of determining the baseline revenue of about 532 million was to add the previous 2 years' revenues and then unaudited to the estimated FY09 revenues and dividing that by 2. And it was also emphasized that the SAS group worked collaboratively to develop this baseline figure. And the question I have is, has the method of using only 1 year of collection experience, and I'm not talking about PEVs, I'm talking about baseline, but the method of using 1 year collection of experience plus estimated collection for the current year and dividing by 2, has that been your standard method of projecting baseline revenues, Bertha or Lou? And I guess yes or no, because I have my time's running. Yes
Standard?
or no? Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, just a point of information, Senator Calvo.
Yeah.
But may I just comment that
Sure.
I don't think that, I mean, are you directing the question to
Yeah,
me?
because I'm looking at the explanations yesterday, and I'm just saying it was the O of B explanation, but I do know SAS and SES has worked together in fact, there was unanimous agreement on revenue, on SAS and SES meetings in regards to revenue. So I'm just wondering the methodology in the past, and I do understand the normal practice in BBMR has been anywhere from a minimum of 3 years to a maximum of 10 years of collection experience, and those numbers are usually statistically smoothed out. And the model, of course, we developed uses 10 and not only 1 year of collection experience. And of course, I haven't even gotten to the PEVs, but just on the base revenue, from the explanation yesterday, and my understanding of that explanation, I'm asking you that question: is that methodology is something that you have used in this particular?
Well, I guess, as you correctly pointed out, Senator, there are many dynamics that have occurred since the estimate back in January. And I think in fairness to OFB, they made a presentation yesterday which I'm familiar with because we participated in SES and the SAS meetings when the revenues were sanctioned, maybe the estimate was sanctioned. The methodology between OFB and BBMR's methodology, they're similar. Maybe the range in as far as the number of years used, the range may be different, but the bottom line when the day was done is that we are within about less than 1% of the estimates, maybe even closer than 1%. That's the
Sure.
only way
So-
I could answer.
Sure. And I guess the question, I know that the model that was used in OFB, and that's what the question I'm saying, that is not a model that you're using. The 2 years divided by 2. For the,
Well,
but did those numbers come out from yourself as well?
the numbers, we did agree with the numbers in the major categories, such as income tax and GRT. We came to an agreement. We got together on several occasions, informally and formally, with the SES group and the SAS group. And we were comfortable with their methodology. It's always good to have different models.
Sure.
And, you know, as we had a different model when you were committee chair, you had a different model, we had a different model. We were not very far apart, and the results, as a matter of fact, were not that much of a variance in the 2 fiscal years that you were committee chair.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing unusual about having a different model. As a matter of fact, it's encouraged. I wish we had like 5 more models so
Sure.
we can compare it all in the end.
Yeah, and for the record, I think my time is running out.
Yes.
So obviously the old standard models that I'm used to working and knowing how BBMR works,
Still doing it.
then they have
Yes.
reconciled and you're in agreement with the methodology and the how would you say, the base revenue line that was calculated through that methodology from OFB.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. That's the questions I have.
Thank you very much, Senator Cabo. I just wanted to also point out, Senator Cabo, to give you the information. You mentioned the Q-Mark poll, and maybe you can give us that. That would help us. But the other part of the poll, the other part of the poll.
Confidential.
But the Q-Mark poll, as you mentioned, used 638 as the average expenditure of the tourism coming on Guam. Our model, when we build those numbers in, God, I'm beginning to sound so Republican. We actually reduced that. We actually reduced that. Our model assumes an expenditure rate of $600. So because we look at these numbers, we look at GVB numbers. GVB, by the way, the numbers for GVB for July is only down 7%. That's the latest. But what we're doing is, we're using these data sets of data points, and we kind of make our own judgment because that's what we're here for. I mean, we're here to test our judgment against judgments made by other individuals and other experts and other people who work the system within the government of Guam. And so in our judgment, we just reduce the average expenditure a little bit more by $38. So
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to give you that information.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm an optimist too, and obviously you're a little bit more optimistic, which is good. It's good to be optimistic. I'm just not as optimistic.
Yes.
But I have one last question on the PEVs. Now, I do note that there's about $50 million in investment activity. Just further explanation on the 50 million on that must be the military buildup, correct?
Chris?
This is the 49.8. That's the number
Yeah.
you're referring to?
Yeah.
So that's a combination of large projects that would generate additional money into our economy. So that would be a combination of ERA projects, capital improvement projects. It would also be military construction. It would also be service-based contracts within the federal government. It's basically a combination of all those things, but they're large contracts. So the smallest size of the contract in the database might be $2, $3, $4 million, ranging all the way up to hundreds of millions.
Sure. In fact, one more follow-up question. Then I know you mentioned on tourism statistics. In fact, I was overly optimistic in the past. I thought it was $300 per day per spend, but that was way off. Originally, my assumptions on tourism numbers and spending. Now, you have the Aurora Hotel closure, the Continental employees furloughed, the decrease in tourists. You're seeing the impacts of that reduction. Mm-hmm. When you take a look at the tourism services industry and you see the decreases and what the impact, and it shows on your PEVs
Right.
an estimated about 7 million, of which 5.3 million is the impact on GRT and 400,000 on the individual income taxes. So it is your opinion also that the decrease in tourist arrivals expected to impact will be only about 7 million in revenues?
That's correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator Tenorio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Art, welcome, and of course, Bertha and Lou.
I'm sorry, I just want to thank you. Thank you, Senator Tenorio. Mr. Art Ilagan, also the Director of Revenue and Taxation, is here, and we want to thank him for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to kind of preface my question to Art with observations that I've had when I'm going out there. You know, Mr. Chairman, we all go to the restaurants, we all go to the hotels, and we go to the different retail outlets and we talk to people, and you know, what I'm hearing from people is business is soft, the economy is soft, and it's been soft for a while because of global economic slowdown, because of the swine flu, which is the H1N1, of course. And so when I'm talking to people, and of course there's people that are laid off looking for work, they're saying, how can you have an increase in, you know, the growth of the economy and of course the outlook for 2010 when they're wondering how we'll be able to make ends meet this year. So Art, there was a revenue financial statement that came out in as of June that showed 387 million, I think it was, that we had collected to that point. It was $387 million in revenues as per the financial statement. Is that correct? Art or Bertha?
You're referring to the tracking for June.
Right.
Yes, 387.8 million was collected from October to June, and that represents 0.56% as compared to the same period in fiscal year 2008. So there's an increase of 0.56% overall. The tracking is showing 511 million, and that represents 1.85% of the adopted. However, as compared to the actuals over the same period for fiscal year 08, it's only 1.2%. And I want to note that it's not unusual for tracking. As a matter of fact, it is actually our tracking at this point is actually very good. Only on 2 fiscal years in the last 10 have we ever been this close at this time of year. And those years were 2004 and 2007. And 2007 you can just effectively eliminate because it was an unusual year. We were doing a revision of the revenue forecast all the way to the month of August. There was an anomaly that year of 21 million from Section 30. We were adjusting the revenues all the way to August, so of course we were going to come close. But besides 2007, there was only one other year, 2004, that we were this close. So there's really no need for alarm. It is not unusual to be within 1.85% of estimates. It's actually very, very good. It's excellent.
So,
And just for the record,
Yeah.
you know, in our projections, and when we took a look at that $21 million adjustment in FY 2007, we did not include that in our base to go forward in the projection.
yeah, because it's one of those anomalies that is a spike, or as you said, is an anomaly that is not normally occurring. So you have to smooth out those figures and determine the projection, I assume.
And we didn't include it in ours as
Right.
well. Yeah.
Yes, the baseline revenues that we're discussing do not include those monies, the Section 30 monies, so they're outside of that.
Yeah, I
So there's no
understand.
need to
Those are the
smooth
PE.
it because
No,
it's already outside.
Even the regular Section 30, we don't, because we don't need to estimate it.
You already know what it is.
What we project are the variable, the ones that are variable based upon economic activity. Section 30, we ask for it, we get it, so we don't have to build that into our base to try and figure out what the projection is going forward. It just doesn't make sense.
Okay, so Bertha or Art, are we on, again, this is one of those yes or no questions, are we on track to collect $532 million this year?
No, the estimate is 520 for this fiscal year.
Are we on track to collect 520?
According to the June tracking, we're tracking 511, and I'm saying it's within very acceptable range, and there is still that potential of achieving 520. We still have 1 quarter of collections to go.
How much do we need to collect from June as of the last financial, which is the 9 months out of the 12? How much from that period to the end of the fiscal year, which is, of course, July, August, September? How much do we need to collect in those last 3 months in order to reach that 520 goal?
About 520. 387, 11. About 133 million overall that we would have to collect. The balance of this quarter, including
Okay.
July, yeah.
So that would be $44 million per month on average. Is that
On
about
a-
right?
On average, yes.
Okay. Is that achievable? Because I'm looking at, these are not your best months, correct? In the whole scheme of the 12-month period, overall, the cycle, the revenue of the government?
September usually is a good month. It's one of the high months.
Okay.
The tracking, income tax revenues increased during the first 9 months of 2009 relative to the same period, and we're actually tracking 2% above the FY09 estimates. Business privilege tax, we also increased over the 9-month period, and all of the economic indicators with regard to what Senator Calvo was alluding to, the decline in visitor arrivals, the foreclosures and real estate transactions, and these are all a part of the methodology that we use. These have all been taken into account in coming up with the estimates.
Okay, so just one more time. The actual estimated receipts, based on your projections, at the end of this year will be how many millions of dollars projected to receive by the end of the fiscal year?
Well, as of the June actuals, as of actual collections up to June, the tracking is showing 511. But what I'm saying is that we still have a quarter left, and we're doing well as far as that compared to the estimates because we're within 2%. So the potential for achieving the 520 is very likely.
Chris, did you mention yesterday that you're actually looking to collect 532? Was that the number that I remember?
Yes, but it's not an apples-to-apples comparison. So the provision for refunds is taken into account in all of those numbers, and that assumes we're going to pay out all those provision for refunds. Our model doesn't do that. We apply the provision for refunds after we do all the projecting. So there's a difference in methodology, and I think that's why
So you got 12 million different.
We're projecting to end the year after provision for refunds is applied at 511 million. And it's the exact same as the administration.
Yeah, I think when you say, do we expect to collect 520, we're gonna collect more than 520, because the 520 is an adopted revenue for the expenditure. But on top of that, we're paying the refunds. We're not gonna pay the entire amount that we set aside. So when you say we're gonna end up the year under 520, no, we're not. We're gonna collect in terms of cash more than 520 million, because we're paying out the refunds on top of that 520. So we will collect more than the 520, but if we were to pay out the income tax refunds at what was reserved, then we would not have 520 million to pay for the operational expenses of this government based on the appropriation authority. And that's where Bertha has come in terms of grabbing those 5% reserves at the beginning of the year, because our appropriation level at that time was above what we had estimated as the requirement for the operations of those agencies. And so Bertha immediately instituted the 5% reserve so that we won't end up spending up the 520 rate because she already knew, based upon the actual expenditure requirement and the provision for refunds, that we will be short. So when you say, will we collect 520? Yes, we will. How much will we collect? Probably close to maybe 600 million, because we have set aside on top of the 520 operational revenue the reserve for refunds, and we've been paying that out. But it doesn't affect the 520. We never adjust the 520 based upon those payouts. Ours, we hope that it'll occur, because that's the way we figured ours, that we're going to make those actual payments.
Right. Which, every time we do the budget, Mr. Chairman, that we always have, probably closer to 600 or in excess of $600 million. And then we wrap into this overall revenue estimate, all the set-asides for tax refunds, for debt service, and all the other things, which are really expenditures, but are embodied within that same section called revenue, which we really should be kind of separating out and actually putting on the expenditure side, which ultimately yeah, exactly, but it's a $540 million actual available for the government of Guam to spend, inclusive of those set-asides. Art, we had a record number of income tax payments that have come out from the bond proceeds. We've had COLA disbursements made in the many millions of dollars. As a result of that, are you seeing a corresponding increase in the tax revenues that you would ordinarily see when people receive those kind of sums of money?
When we issued the refunds and the COLA, I think it was in the middle part of June that we started to do that. And the numbers didn't really show up in July the way we thought. It didn't show up, I believe, the way it should. When I went to the banks, the credit unions, and I asked them how people were handling their checks, they were saying they were mostly cashing it. Part of probably the reasons why is we offset some amounts to, like, the hospitals, the child support, and those are not taxable entities. They're not somebody that would report taxes, so somebody has to account for those amounts to not increase revenues. We're still hoping that they held on to their monies and they're paying their bills down probably, and not, and maybe some of these businesses that they're paying to are on an accrual basis, and they reported their income in the past and now are just receiving the cash for it. So maybe those should be accounted for.
So in your estimation, do you concur with Bertha with respect to the revenue stream coming into the government and the cash receipts and the other payments that are being made to revenue and taxation? You're the biggest recipient of those monies. So is your information consistent with that of the other SAS and SES with regards to the revenue stream of the government?
It all comes from one source, and that's through the Department of Administration, and we all get the same reports.
So you agree that we're going to hit the original estimate of 520, 511, depending on how you calculate it?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Any other comments? If not, I want to thank the members of the administration for joining us this morning. Yes, we're done. Thank you very much. We certainly appreciate your presence. I'm sorry we took away some of your time from work because I know you guys have a lot. And Bertha, thank you for coming in. I know you were at home a little bit sick, and Art's still issuing checks on the refunds. So thank you. Once again, thank you very much. Just a short recess while we have our guests leave. waiting for the speaker. No, Eddie did. All right. The Committee of the Whole is back in session. We are now on Chapter 2, Part 1. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues, I wanted to kind of give you a briefing, a short synopsis of the budget. The budget you see is different than in previous years in that the budget of each of the departments and agencies is broken down into the object classification for the expenditure. So it's based upon the object classification and for the expenditure levels. And these were all based upon the discussion that we've had, of course, during the public hearing process of the budget over the summer months, of the needs of the department and the expenditure levels in each of those object classifications. This is different from the past. We wanted to do this as a philosophical approach to the budget, and the issue of what we all want is transparency and trying to keep the public informed with regards to how the monies are being spent in the departments and agencies of their government. And so it is a little bit of a departure in this, but it is not so much a departure that it is brand new. In the past, this legislature, through its history, has adopted different forms of the budget for the government of Guam. And in the past, one of the ways that they've done is just like this. Probably we all hear the story of the chairman of one of the finance committees back in the earlier days of this legislature, Chairman Richard Taitano, and how Chairman Taitano was so interested in ensuring that the public revenues and resources are accounted for, that he even went into such a detail in the budget that was passed that we knew how many pencils we were buying. And back then, our government was small enough that we could actually know exactly. This time, we've kind of are not into that kind of detail, thank God. But we are in such a detail where we know what the cost centers are of this government and where the money is being applied. And so with that preface, I wanted to then move forward on the expenditure, the different chapters which set aside the operation and the appropriation levels for each of the government programs that we have. So, I am sorry. My staff just pointed to me that I'm a little too eager. Section 3 of the budget bill. Senator Cruz, I'm sorry. We adopted the revenues on Section 2. Section 3 is the debt service appropriations for debt service.
I noted in this budget that we have not set aside anything for the 2 bonds that were floated this last month.
That's correct.
How much, when will that be included, and how much is that on an annual basis combined?
According to the official statements on the issuance of those bonds, the first payments kick in 2012, I believe. So in fiscal year 2012 will be the first time that we will have to budget for the payment. One of the reasons why the budget, the bond issues are above the cost of those projects or the cost of those obligations is that we capitalize interest for the first year and 2 years in one instance. So we've actually borrowed money to pay the interest beginning this fiscal year, and that was built into the proceeds of the bonds. The total debt service, I don't have that, and it's in the $20 million range.
The $20 million range, is there anything in this document that sets aside some of that? Well, maybe I should ask one question first. Is there an early prepayment penalty?
In most instances, bonds of that type, there is a provision for a recall of the bonds or an early payment, and you will need to pay a premium on the initial interest payment that you have. If you pay the bonds early, you're able to recall the bonds and pay them off after the first 10 years without interest, without a prepayment penalty. It depends on how they structured those bonds. But typically, yes, if you paid off a portion of your bonds, the bonds are divided into tranches, and different tranches have different maturity dates. So while we say that the bond is a 30-year bond, it depends on the structure. I haven't seen the official statements, but sometimes they'll structure it so that the first 10 million of principal is paid over the first 3 years, or the first 20 million is paid over the first 10 years, and you can prepay that without the penalty. But the other bonds, and depending on the maturity dates, may have a penalty attached to an early payment. When we say it's a 30-year bond, not every single denomination, every single bond certificate is paid out over 30, because we divide them into tranches, and some of those tranches have differing maturity dates. I don't know the complete structure of the breakdown of those bonds.
If my memory serves me right, the interest payments that we'll be making on the combined bonds is about $500 million. Is that correct?
I would say that's pretty close.
Are we making any provisions to start saving in these first 2 years to set aside some money so that we can, the first year, make a fairly substantial payment? Because I really am concerned about the fact that, I mean, I have no children, but those members of this legislature who have children and grandchildren are going to be paying those into their senior years, as it were, with the age of some of the children that we have here. And I'm just concerned that we should be setting aside some money, especially since there is this 4% increase, to set aside a substantial amount in an escrow account, some kind of trust account, to hold and make a substantial payment as soon as we can start making payments on it.
Yeah, this budget has a 2% reserve built into it, so that from the total revenue that we collect, we actually deduct 2% of that estimated revenue and set it aside for deficit reduction, which could be inclusive of exactly what you're talking about.
But there's no plan for any further amount, just specific for this bond as opposed to deficit reduction. The deficit itself is still in the 300 range with the payment of the income tax and the Lola Cola. Right. We still have at least 300 in deficit. Correct?
If you don't count the retirement fund, which is not counted in the deficit, our deficit inclusive of the income tax, is, you're right, somewhere in the neighborhood north of 200 is correct, and 130 million of that is just the income tax liability that we have for the remaining years of fiscal year or tax year 2007 and 2008.
With the amount of interest that we paid when we paid the income tax, the delayed income tax this last time, would it behoove us to make a even larger set aside for provision for taxes if we have additional money?
Yes, absolutely, and we did that. We bumped the provision.
Yeah,
by
we
an
bumped
extra-
it up 10%.
Right.
But we paid like 70 million in tax. Was it? How much was the interest on that we paid? 40 million?
Yes, I think it's somewhere in that number.
I mean, that really is, that's all the line agencies.
Yeah.
Plus, we've got to figure out some way of paying more of that, more of the income tax, so that we don't end up in 4 years with another $40 million in income tax. All right. Maybe I'll make that amendment later.
Thank you very much, Senator Cruz.
Oh, wait, we already passed that, didn't we?
Yes. So Section 3 is the debt service. And again, these are our current debt obligations. Our total set aside for or budget for the debt service that we have in terms of outstanding bonds and obligations for this fiscal year, or for fiscal year 2010, would be $38,763,019.
It's too late to increase that provision, is there? All right. I just wanted to put it on the record that we have two things that we really have to address. One is to start setting aside some money, and one, we've got to increase the provision for taxes at some point.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Uggett.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker. Just a couple of notations, Mr. Speaker. First of all, the USDA loan. I had communicated with the Chief Executive inquiring whether, in fact, the terms and conditions would necessitate consideration by the legislative body because of the anticipated commitment of Government of Guam proceeds funds, whether they come from general fund or whether they come from the tipping fees. I have yet to receive that particular communication, but obviously that we anticipate that any negotiations hopefully will not require an outright payment in fiscal year 10. But the good Vice Speaker, Mr. Chairman, had alluded to the incorporation of payments, and you're absolutely right that the initial payments would be remitted after subsequent to fiscal year 2012, and of which it's properly notated here in your budget, Mr. Chair, that the bond series, the limited obligation highway refunding component of $6 million, the limited obligation Section 30 bonds of $9.8 million, and then the short-term financing. But I would refrain from really incorporating the short-term financing. These three bond obligations really mature, have an anticipated maturity date of 2012. So in anticipation of that, that's one of the reasons why the initial payment output by the Government of Guam, the commitment of the outstanding bonds that were just recently floated, would be remitted shortly after 2012. So just in that light, perhaps just a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, in terms of the flexibility of the Government of Guam. But I wanted to provide that general notation because you did incorporate into the budget, and it is highlighted that there will be a couple of bonds that will be maturing very shortly, of which we anticipate, based on your budgetary presentation in subsequent years, that would may be offset in terms of the consideration. But we, as the oversight with Gita, I'm still awaiting information, Mr. Chair, on the USDA, and I know that your office is also closely monitoring that in terms of what the commitment will be and when the initial payments will be for the USDA loan of $88 million. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Uggett. Any other comments on Section 3, debt service? All right. If not, then we'll proceed with Chapter 2, Education. Part 1 of Chapter 2 is the Department of Education. The appropriation level is outlined there. For informational purposes, we've included the executive request of 186,427 The appropriation level for the Department of Education being proposed is 193,360, and it's broken down below for your information. The so, any Senator Gutherts?
Mr. Chairman, just a few questions. First, on the University of Guam, could you please tell us what your communication has been with the University of Guam on their budget ceiling as it reflected here? And whether...
We're a little ahead of the game.
Oh, we are?
Yes, we're on DOE.
Oh, we're still on DOE. I'm
Yes.
sorry. Okay.
University of Guam is
All right, I'll wait.
Part
I'll
one.
wait. Thank you.
Yes. So, yeah. For your information and the information of the body, the budget here that is loaded or proposed to you, there's been a couple questions that were raised by the Department of Education, and it revolves around the school lunch program and whether or not the school lunch program is reflected in their base budget, in the base operation. You'll see that in section 2, there's a school nutrition meals appropriation that totals $9.7 million, and that is inclusive of 7.5 for the federal grant, a general fund appropriation being proposed of $1.5 million, and a $700,000 appropriation based upon the cash collection. So the total budget or appropriation being proposed for the school lunch program is $9.7 million. We are looking at the contractual and the supplies section of the budget to make a determination from the Department of Education, because their numbers and their representation is that the school lunch program is not within that. Is within their current operation, and so when we separate it, they're saying that they need additional money for the school lunch program. But the way we have presented the budget, we have taken their base operations with regards to their salaries and so forth. So the salary line here, there's no, we are in agreement with the salaries and the benefits with the Department of Education, and Senator Wampat's office did the analysis also. And all of our numbers agree on the salary and the benefit level. So that's not there's no issue there. On the contractual, we're still dealing with resolving a couple of issues in that area, and the supplies and materials for the schools, they're also requesting that we continue to work on that line item number. So I just wanted you to see that, to understand that with regards to the first part, section 1 of this part 2 or part 1 of the bill with regards to DOE. I see Senator Respicio, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, is the administration current with its allotment releases to DOE?
Not to our knowledge. Not to our knowledge.
And
There's
if
still a
they're not,
delay.
and if they're not, how do we reconcile their current obligations for this fiscal year? Because those needs would have to be carried over. I know in the area of food services, I know that vendor is really behind payment. How could we reconcile that in this process?
It's not reflected in
It's
this.
not, I know.
No, it's not reflected. What we're doing, though, in this budget is fully funding, at least from our perspective, what we have been able and been informed as the obligations of the school lunch program, so that we separate that appropriation and not build it into the base budget, so that that line item is reflected, and we know that we'll charge against it and charge against the 9.5 versus trying to find the money within the regular allotment and regular appropriation.
Will there be any provisions for authorization for carryover
Yes,
authorizations for prior year obligations?
Yes.
So in the
We
event.
can build that also in the administrative provisions. That would
Okay.
be when we would address that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. I saw Senator Cruz, Senator Uggan, and then Senator Palacios.
I'll wait until we get to section 3 of DOE.
All right. Okay. Okay. Senator Uggan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In this case, I think that, when we look at the overall budget, Mr. Speaker, you've provided an excellent presentation in terms of the local contribution. I think that we need to view this also from a totality perspective, a total perspective, in looking at the ARA funds. There's approximately $32.5 million that was just submitted in terms of ARA funds, American Reinvestment and Recovery Act funds that could conceivably be utilized in the upcoming fiscal year for all of the schools for maintenance purposes or whatever the superintendent decides how to use that. I think there's another notation, Mr. Speaker, that I want to commend your committee and OFB for moving towards, and that is allowing the mayors to be able to maintain some of the grounds of the school facilities. When we get to the mayor's budget component, there is some allocation there of funds to be able to assist the mayors in their respective districts in terms of providing support to the school. So I think that even if you look at it from totality, not only can we anticipate possibly $32.5 million in the next year and a half for DOE, but also that the mayors have been allocated some resources to be able to provide direct support to the respective schools within their districts. And I don't have that exact figure, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, but it is incorporated into this budget component, and I think that also has to be looked at as part of the indirect contribution to the Department of Education. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator Palacios?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just look at on page 10, again, the drug testing charges. Of course, DOE with over 3,000 employees, there's no amount for drug testing.
Yes, they did not submit in their budget any amount for that line item category. We'll have to verify, but in the summary, we did not see that.
So I understand, of course, that they have a drug-free workplace policy in place. So, I'm just kind of curious why there's a zero amount here for an agency that employs over 3,000 employees. On one more item on the utility bank, this is referring actually to the total amount appropriated to DOE on page 10. So, I was looking at on the incentive for savings and so forth. I think that was on page 12. So, let me see. Utility reduction incentive. I think it's referring, the utility pool is referring to actually the total amount on page 10, right?
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to.
Yeah, because what we have is that the schools also in the budget have a power utility line item.
Okay.
So this 12 million is divided into the school.
Okay.
And so every time they make a savings,
They tap into that.
Yes.
That's a good item there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ada.
Mr. Chairman, just on those two amounts that have been budgeted for the power and water utilities, how close are those figures from, let's say, previous year's billings?
Those numbers are actually a little bit higher. They built in for increases. So we compared those with an 18-month average billing cycle. When we took the 18 months and looked at it, and it's pretty much spot on.
Yeah. So what we did, Senator Ada, was we took the actual billings, and in those billings, we decided to go back 18 months because there were a couple of up and down adjustments in the LEAC during that time. And so we took that 18-month actual consumption, and then I think the inflation factor or factor for proposed power rate increase about 6%, and then that's how we got to this amount. Senator Wampat's staff also actually looked at every single power bill that DOE receives.
Okay, and this also takes into account the new, I guess there's one new school that'll be opening up this year?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Senator, I'm sorry, Speaker Wampat?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I know the bad thing is I'm behind two men in front of me, so I had to find my extended arm here. Mr. Chairman, I know I just want to reiterate, of course, that I know that our committee is working very closely with your committee, and I know that there are still some numbers that we need to be able to reconcile. So my question is, though, because earlier there was, a motion that, we would continue to move on and there won't be an opportunity to go back. But I need to ask that that exception be made here only because there is that question that we're trying to clarify specifically when it comes to the lunch program because we received information that there is now a private school that will be participating in that federal breakfast and lunch program. And based on the information we received is that the 7.5 million was not just a federal grant, 100% grant that will come back to our public schools, but for all schools who basically participate in this program. And so we need to figure out, of course, language in which now there will be a private school and how then that we will be able to do the reimbursement now, not just to public school, but a private school. So do we need to take a vote in terms of us coming back specifically to this?
No, I think that what we'll do is we'll just suspend the discussion then on
at least Section 1?
At least Section 1 and Section 2 if you wish, because Section 2 is the appropriation
Yes,
for
I'm
the
sorry,
school
yes,
district.
Section 1. So that would be my motion then,
Okay.
is to suspend with Section 1 and 2
Right.
of the DOE budget until we're able to reconcile the numbers with DOE.
Okay, all right. On that motion, there's no objection. We're now on Section 3, which is the miscellaneous appropriations. Just, by the way, just before we go to Section 3, I wanted for the body to just also provide additional information that we received. On the funding for the Department of Education, we all talk about the ARA funds, but the Department of Education is also receiving an increase under in projected in funding for the regular title grants. They're going to receive for FY 2010, their allocation for Title I grants will be about $5.8 million on top of their current grant, Title I grant. They get a $1.6 million school improvement grant. These are for FY year 2010, over and above their present grants. For educational technology grants, they get $681,000. For vocational rehabilitation state grants, they're going to get an additional $371,000. For the IDEA Part B grant to the states, they're going to get an additional $341,000. For federal work study, their allocation is $73,000, and the IDEA Part C grants for infants and family is an additional $34,000. So these are money above their current federal grant, outside of the state physical and stabilization fund grant that we all know about of $72 million. So that is an additional money that will be available to DOE on top of the current grants they're getting in those categories. The total right. The total of 2/3 of this grant for FY 2010, which is inclusive of the state physical stabilization grant, is $46,460,000 of additional grants above their current federal grant levels, and that is 2/3 of the grant under these programs for this fiscal year, or FY 2010. They will get the balance 1/3 in fiscal year 2011. So it's an additional $46 million on top of their current federal grant of about $30-some million, a little over $38 million. So the Department of Education will have this money over and above the local appropriation level we're giving them, over and above their current grants under the formula grants that they receive. So just for your, Senator Cruz, I'm sorry. Thank you very much for your indulgence.
Oh, no problem. Thank you very much for recognizing Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in Section 3B, you have allotted $271,754 for health and physical education activities. If memory serves me right, we have, now with all the new schools going online, almost 40 campuses, right? Maybe 37? Something, well, whatever it is, it comes out to less than about $8,000 a campus that we've allotted for PE.
Right. This request the amount was submitted by the governor's office and part of the governor's original budget submittal. So we did not increase it.
I understand, and I had written to the superintendent and the deputy superintendent who had been assigned to respond to my request about physical education in the schools. Was off for the month of July, and was supposed to have responded to me when she got back the first of this month, but I think they were trying to get the schools open, and she hasn't responded to me on this. And I just wanted to point out that $8,000 a campus is really not going to do much in the way of getting any kind of equipment, or even to contract someone to do PE in the schools. And the $271,000 is about as much as you would pay for an open heart surgery at this point, if I'm not mistaken.
I hope to never have to look at that bill again.
Yes, that's what I mean. And so I'm just saying, will there be a time in the future that we can address this issue? Because it really concerns me. If my memory serves me right, the BMI testing that was done in the schools showed that 61% of our kids are overweight in the school system. 61. The national average is about 23. And that's I don't know what our percentage of obesity, but it's just, I just wanted to point that out, and I know that that's how much was sent down by the governor's office. I'm disappointed because I thought that the BMI testing was the lieutenant governor's baby and had been pushing for healthy children, and to provide less than $8,000 per campus to address physical education is just not going to cut it, and it almost is an insult to the program to say that's what we're going to do with it. I just don't know how much I'm going to ask for an increase in it, except for the fact that to even hire a PE teacher for every campus would run us into $1 million at $30,000 or $35,000 for a beginning teacher plus benefits times 30 comes out to a little 900 some. And so it's just I think my speaker has them.
All right. Speaker Wampat. Thank you very much, Senator Cruz.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I understand where the senator is coming from, and because it is a big issue when we think of the health of our children, and then with the most recent bill to start looking at, the body fat, body density is. The thing about it is that in the elementary schools, I know that the teachers go through the program to teach basically all of the subjects, including PE. What has happened as a result is that the department realized that that wasn't happening. And there were teachers who lobbied the legislature, I can't remember the year, to then have the department hire a PE teacher for, every one PE teacher per school, elementary school. It's not a problem in the middle and the high schools because they have their regular PE health teachers and then the requirement of taking PE in the high school. The problem would be in the elementary schools, and they've never been able to hire, of course, the total number needed in the elementary schools, and much less, of course, it hasn't even been budgeted. Senator Ada, can I ask if you can move a little bit to your left? Thank you. I want to see the chairman's. So that has been, of course, the problem is actually budgeting additional, again, personnel. The department has never really enforced the curriculum. That is a major problem, and it's not just in the elementary schools. We're seeing it throughout K-12, and that's, of course, a policy, a decision that the board and Dr. Underwood's going to have to make. If the senator is saying that, and I did the calculations as well, that $8,000 is basically what we're looking at only for the elementary schools, then that definitely can't go towards personnel, but more for supplies to replenish whatever supplies that the schools then will need to purchase all of the PE equipment that they can use when the teachers go out to the playground with the children. So that's where we're at. And I know there's the discussion possibly of trying to increase the amount. And as much as I like to support that, the only reason why I can't right now is only because I'm still concerned about Section 1, where monies would have to be shifted instead to address, the contractual issue. So I couldn't very well support that. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Just as a note before I call on the next senator, in this area, the interscholastic sports, this appropriation has actually been increased to provide the outrigger canoe and rugby programs to be part of the DOE program. There was an agreement between these two organizations that they would pilot these sports in the schools for about 3 years and see what kind of a participation they can have. And so the whole program was voluntary. And so after the piloting of the program, we find, or the school system found, that rugby and outrigger canoe, actually the total participation in those two sports across the schools is over 2,000 children participate in that sport. So this year we're providing additional stipends for the coaches of those organizations because that was the agreement and they requested. Some of the coaches are saying it's just too much on a purely volunteer basis, especially when all the other sports get a stipend. So this builds in the normal stipend for rugby and outrigger canoe sports program. The other appropriation in here that was not part of the appropriation from the governor or request from the governor's office, but we added, is the $100,000 appropriated for busing. We found from the sports directors that they said, and the principals, that sometimes the children don't participate in the sport because they have no way of getting there. And so in the past, we've always funded the busing program, but we haven't over the last several years. And so this year, based upon the presentation at the public hearings by the sports director and the administration of the schools, we included $100,000 for busing for the sports activities and the interscholastic programs. So, I'm sorry. Senator Rector, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To go back on a little historical knowledge, at one point, DOE actually did have PE specialists in the elementary schools. And this was a very productive thing to get kids out in a structured physical fitness program, which, as we know, helps keep kids healthy. I think it's disingenuous to have a program that turns around and tells kids they're fat, but then doesn't give them a structured way to help prevent that and solve that problem, which we currently have. And hopefully, when we get into the miscellaneous provisions, we've got programs to go forward and hopefully start funding that. I'm thinking predominantly that this $271,754 is not to cover personnel, but just to cover equipment at the schools to replace and replenish.
I believe so.
Correct. And then to go back on the interscholastic fund, one of the problems that we have, and first off, kudos to you for putting in busing on the interscholastic funds. I know that's been a huge burden for parents and students, not having a structured busing program so that they can get to the games and from them. But we've also had concerns in the past of poor kids not being able to afford the physicals so that they can participate in interscholastic sports, which is quite difficult for many of our low-income families that are in public schools. And hopefully when we get to the administrative provisions, once again, I will have ways to help to fund that so that every child can afford to participate in interscholastic sports. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? All right, we'll now proceed to, Speaker Wampat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, on the busing, the request was $92,000, and I wanted to know how is it that the committee derived at the figure of $100,000, and it was because we've made some phone calls as well to the office, and they were fine with that number. That was the actual numbers that they said that they had agreed to. But I'm just kind of curious as to how was it that the committee decided to give an additional $8,000? Because if not, then if you have no real good numbers, then I'm going to make that motion to bring it back down to 92.
Okay, we're kind of rounding.
Oh, you were rounding. Okay, well, that's. So I'm going to make that motion then, because I've got to collect money here to go to my contractual. So that's my motion then.
So there's an amendment then to reduce the 100,000 to 92. No objections? Amendment passes.
Can I make that? I'm being advised by my colleagues to make sure.
Actually, Madam Speaker, the 92 that they requested did not cover in our opinion, did not cover the rugby and canoe, and so with the addition of those two sports, we rounded up.
But
that's fine.
No, but I have to also mention, because initially when we were talking to them, they were giving us an outrageous number of travels per sport.
That's right.
And so the numbers have just been padded in terms of the number of travels. And we were actually instructed that the most important will be the travel to the event and not the return. So that's where the numbers then were being brought down.
So I'm fine with the amendment. Thank you.
So can I make the other amendment
Yes.
that $8,000 that we're tracking it towards the contractual?
The balance.
The balance, you're right, for contractual.
Okay, so
just so we can keep track of
yes.
The numbers.
The amendment then would be the reduction in the appropriation level from 100,000 to 92. The reduction of 8,000 is then appropriated to the contractual line item for the Department of Education. All right. No objections?
No objection.
That amendment passes. Okay. We're now in the summer school program. The summer school program is a standalone program for the Department of Education. It's funded just from the revenues of the program. But we needed to provide the language for that. So, any discussion on the summer school program? If not, we're now on the textbooks and the collateral material. As in the past, the textbook and collateral material appropriation is appropriated from the advance. It's an advance appropriation from fiscal year 2011. And the amount is $2 million. Any discussion on the textbooks? Okay. We'll now, Senator Barnes on the textbooks.
Just to inquire, Mr. Speaker, based on the $2 million appropriation for that textbooks on the past, if there was any knowledge as to the update on the provisions of the textbooks that were ordered in the past, and if they're up to date in that, because I do know that in the last term there was a request for textbook funding, and I just want to see where we're at, if we're up to date on that, if GPSS or DOE is up to date on that.
The legislature provided funding in the last previous one on two different appropriation levels.
Right.
They are waiting for the release of $2.9 million for the total appropriation from the previous years for the ordering of the textbooks. They were
right, because I understand in the past it was at $3 million, and I just wanted to make sure that if this is $2 million, would that suffice going forward?
Yes, this is the requested amount.
And this is the request, but based on the two previous appropriations, that will again bring DOE up to date, and that there will not be a request for supplemental funding in the 2010 fiscal year. No,
this amount of $2 million was part of the governor's submittal as the appropriation level required for DOE. DOE had sent down, I think as part of their $260 million request, I think they said about $4 million for textbooks, but they already had, I think, a $5.9 million appropriation prior to that. This is the request of the governor in the budget bill, which was not amended at all by the committee when we substituted the bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Speaker Wampat and then Senator Guthrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to also remind our colleagues is that because of the legislation that we passed, which actually has extended the adoption of the new textbooks, that this amount all the time will be to address then new adoptions. What they've done is that for this year, because of the DI program, and they have now included all the other subjects, the reason why the amount went up was because they were doing reorders of all the books now, not just a specific subject area, but all the books on reorders, and not necessarily all new adoptions for all the subject areas.
Thank you very much, Speaker Wampat. Senator Guthrie and then Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I've always had concerns about the way the Department of Education identifies and orders textbooks. This has been a problem at the Department of Education for many, many years. And I recall, Mr. Chairman, when I was a member of the elected Territorial Board of Education, one of the first things I asked as a new member of the board of the then Director of Education was, may I see your textbook inventory? And I was told we don't have one. The board was quite shocked at that time, and we asked the then superintendent or Director of Education to begin the process of preparing a comprehensive textbook inventory, knowing full well that they shouldn't be ordering books unless they know what they have or don't have. My understanding was that that did not happen until rather recently, when a textbook inventory initiative was actually begun. But in looking at this issue, aside from the dollar costs, and of course, textbooks today are very, very expensive. And if you look at our three educational institutions collectively, the Guam Community College orders textbooks and of course resells them to students. The University of Guam orders textbooks and resells them to students. The Guam Public School System orders textbooks that are used by students. But I think we should ask this question. Is there a better way for this government to utilize precious dollars to acquire textbooks? I think there's a better way, and I would like to see included in this budget, Mr. Chairman, a requirement that the 3 educational institutions get together and identify and propose a new mechanism to the Guam Legislature to acquire textbooks, whether they're for selling purposes or utilization purposes. The power of the dollars that this government spends regularly to buy textbooks should bring us better prices. We're not leveraging our collective power from the 3 educational institutions because they are individually ordering books. But if they come together and they design a mechanism to acquire books, they might be able to get better prices and better responses from the book publishers. Right now, everybody does their own thing, and I think we're losing the opportunity to save money and do a better job at this. So I would like to see a requirement that these 3 educational institutions come together collectively to develop a new methodology to order textbooks and acquire textbooks, and to recommend legislation to us to help facilitate this. We can give them 120 days to come up with this proposal. We can go ahead and do what we're doing now, but we need a better way to do this. This old approach is outdated. It doesn't save us money. We overpay for books. We can get a better deal if our 3 educational institutions work together. So I'd like to propose that. I'd like to ask legal counsel to help me draft that language to include as an amendment to the section to require these institutions to get together and to propose a new mechanism and to send it to us within 120 days.
Yes, all right. We'll have you work on that. I just wanted to note, though, that in Chapter 2, Part 6, page 29, there's a provision in here for purchasing in economies of scale. But you wanted to be more specific.
I want it more specific, and I want the 3 educational institutions to work together. I'll tell you, the students at GCC and UOG are suffering because the textbooks are so expensive.
Well, we know that we could probably get DOE and UOG for sure.
Point of order, Mr.
To get
Chair.
those 2 heads to work together.
I think we can also get the community college involved.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I know we can have come up with a lot of great ideas, and we're all capable of doing that. But these ideas must be vetted through the new public.
I've asked the legal counsel
30-2.
to draft the language.
But
Thank you.
the legal counsel can't conduct a public hearing on that, and I think that's a requirement of.
Yeah.
Not appropriating money.
Please address the chair.
Senator, please address the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, do you think that this requires a public hearing?
I cannot.
Mr. Chairman?
I cannot.
Mr. Chairman.
I cannot respond to that until I see
can't
what
either.
you are
So
proposing
let's.
in writing.
I think it's a simple. It's something that needs to be done. Thank you.
But we do have. We are guided by different rules with regards to this budget. Senator Rector and then Speaker Wampat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Man, it's getting exciting already, I'll tell you. Actually, on the issue of textbooks, I've been working with the superintendent for quite some time now to find a new and better way to do this that Senator Guthertz was just requesting. And thanks to the ARA funding that President Obama's put forth in these initiatives, the superintendent is going to use some of this ARA funding to get a laptop for every kid, or every student, I should say, better use of the language. And then what we're going to try and do is work out with a bigger school district, such as the state of California, and bulk buy with them on electronic textbooks. So we are working on the process even as we speak to find better ways, more up-to-date and modern ways to give our kids the information they need in a way that they can best utilize it. So this is a process and work that's been underway for quite some time. So thank you.
Thank you very much for providing us that information. Speaker Wampat. We are on section 5,
yes.
textbooks and collateral material.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I agree with both of the previous speakers, and I'd just like to make a correction that the Department of Education, yes, has always had a textbook inventory in place. But there are other problems other than that, in which we found some mistakes, of course, being made by some of the administrators, where they've submitted a request, and that's why the numbers have gone up, when in essence there really shouldn't have been a request. And then it's just a management type problems, I think, that can be addressed rather than us legislating this. And I know we're working very closely with the superintendent to correct some of these discrepancies that are in place. And yes, more importantly, is that there is the availability of our monies and other technology monies, because we made that suggestion last year, if you recall, in the budget, that they should seriously look at either piloting it at a school, but she's actually looking at all the schools in terms of having some e-books, and to eventually reduce the cost of what it is that we're spending for textbooks. So it's in the works.
Thank you very much. Senator Cabo, what are you working on?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, again, I want to congratulate you also, folks, for putting education as the #1 spending classification after the revenues and the debt service. I think we've all come to that agreement over these past few years in working with budgets, that the education component is critical and of the primary focus of this body, and it should be that policy. We're having this tremendous military buildup coming up in the future. When that boom is over, what is design going to look at like, and how we as a people are going to participate in this new Guam. And that's really what's so important about education. That is our future. And again, I look forward to working with also the chairman of education, ensuring that we give proper resources. I wasn't really going to make a comment to her earlier, but after listening to a little bit about the good Senator Guthertz had to in regards to breaking the old ways of doing things, I do have to express my concern on the issue, in particular performance-based budgeting. This was the first area out of 9 agencies and departments where there was a mandate for performance-based budgeting starting in September of 2009. It was in the Department of Education, Guam Public School System, DOE, we were to focus on the central office of the Guam Public School System, in particular the performance-based budgeting. Federal government budgets are now performance-based. Most of the states are performance-based. I understood that when we made that mandate and we put it into the Guam Code in moving towards a performance-based budget, that it would be something that we'd have to evolve to, and that was why there was a commitment made that only a certain number of agencies would participate. My concern on this is there are certain provisions later on that show that there is that deadline has been taken out, and I would suppose, based on what I see here and on a line item type of budget, that we are not proceeding in that course. And that's what I've always had the issue. The line item type of budget is something that has been standard in the past, not only in Guam but in other areas. But there has been an evolving of budgeting, focusing on objectives, tangible objectives, and with those tangible objectives, dollars going towards them. I, along with Senator Guthertz, agree on that. Maybe, Senator, as we're working with legal counsel, we could try to see how we can fit in what has already been mandated by law in regards to performance-based budgeting, and how we can not lose the momentum. In fact, Ms. Duenas, I must congratulate Bertha, because at my time at Finance and Taxation, Bertha was embracing performance-based budgeting, and again, I am a little bit concerned because I'm not too sure if now there will be this re-emphasis to other areas, that have been the normal standard budgeting practices of the past. Anyway, I just wanted to convey that concern. And I know we still have a long way to go in this budget process. Maybe we could look at ways to, again, fortify that movement to performance-based budgeting. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator. Okay. Any other discussion on textbooks? If none, we'll proceed then with website posting, Section 6. Any comments on the requirements? Again, these are requirements for the different reports that the Department of Education has, and they're required to be posted on the website. No comments? No amendments? All right. We'll proceed then with reports, Section 7, that they're supposed to be given to us within 15 days of the start, and 30 days after the start of fiscal year, monthly after that. So, no additional comments? Utilities reduction incentive, Section 8. Any comments? Okay. All right. So, other than the suspension on the discussion of Section 1, which is the budget, we've completed 1 and 2. Oh, I'm sorry. I got confused too. We're now on Chapter 2, Part 2. The copying was done so that when you turn the page, 17 is on your right and 16 is on your left. That was how it came out of the machine. So you have to look at the right-hand side of the page, which is page 16, and then 17. I know. So page 16 is not on the back of page 15. Page 16 is the Office of the Education Cirujano. Any comments, discussions? Senator Wampat, then Senator Espadon. I'm sorry, Senator Guthert, it was your hand. Oh no, I'm recognizing you first.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I think it's time that we ask the question, do we need the Education Cirujano? Number two, I think it's time we ask the question, where should the Education Cirujano, should we decide that we need the Education Cirujano, the office be located? I was one of the original supporters of this creation of this office. We established this office with the good leadership of Senator Wampat, as you know, before the Attorney General got in the act. Remember last year, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Why, you don't want to get credit for this? Mr. Chairman, I'm giving the Speaker credit for this.
Please address
She
the
doesn't
chair.
want credit
Thank
for
you.
this. Okay. All right. Mr. Chairman, as I said, I remember we created this office really out of frustration. And we tried to find a way to get more accountability from the Guam public school system. And shortly after the office was created, the Attorney General, with her task force, began this effort to inspect the schools and close schools and et cetera, et cetera. During that period, the Education Cirujano's office almost became insignificant. I still have questions about this office and whether it is needed. But I would like to make a motion that this office be transferred to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office has the Office of the Consumer Counsel, which has a similar function for consumer issues. And this office deals with educational issues in terms of accountability with the 14 points. And I think it could have better oversight of its duties and accountability of what it does and doesn't do if there's supervision through the Attorney General. So I'd like to make that motion that the Office of the Cirujano be transferred to the Attorney General's office and be established as an office within the Attorney General's office.
I'm going to rule that motion out of order at this time. And,
Why?
This is we are on the chapter of the Education Cirujano and the budget.
So where can I put that?
At some later bill that you will introduce separately.
Okay, I'll put it on my list, but I'm very serious about this.
Yes, thank
There's
you.
no oversight of
No.
this office, Mr. Chairman, and I don't think that's right.
I fully understand your
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Senator Spodon. Okay. Okay. All right. Senator Blas.
Mr. Chair, this may seem very innocuous, but this goes in line with a concern that was brought up by the good senator from Talampau yesterday. I noticed here that we're appropriating $80 for drug testing charges. Is this under the assumption that he's going to be hiring?
Yes. The budget provides for staff for the education Surjano.
That said,
And it's to hire an investigator.
so then,
Investigator, inspector, I think it's an inspector.
so there is going to be, we're allowing for two individuals to be, one?
Yeah. I'm sorry. If you go to under section 2, you'll see under vacancies, the regular salaries is the salaries of the current staff. On page 17, which is on the left-hand side of that of page 16, under subsection 2, agency expenses appropriated to central cost funds administered by Department of Administration. You'll see underneath there you have power, water, medical and dental, and then you'll see vacancies. And you'll see an appropriation of $29,000, and that would be put into that vacancy pool and for the credit of the education Surujano.
Okay, that's where.
Yeah, that's where that is. Yeah, you got to go back this way. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. That's why I was looking and says, okay, I don't see where the vacancy was at. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right. Any other discussion? All right. If not, that concludes our discussion on the education Surjano. We're now on Chapter 2, Part 3, the Guam Commission for Educator Certification, Section 1. Any comments? This is the newly created, Speaker Wampat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I know I'm unable to see this here, but is there a request here for an additional personnel that would be needed at the certification office?
Yes, this. Yeah, there is an additional person that has been hired at the commission. That is the executive director. The executive director was included in the third quarter staffing pattern, so your line item there for salaries is inclusive of the executive director.
And do you know if the other individual that was there in that acting capacity has been transferred maybe out of DOE into the certification office, body and position?
No, there are 3 individuals in that office at this time.
But
they're all there.
But
they're all within the budgeted staffing pattern for FY 2000.
But they were originally from a DOE. So what
That's
I'm saying
correct.
is, have we transferred them, taken them out of DOE, and permanently placed them now under this office?
Yes, they are under their own, and they're not within the DOE budget allotment.
And their budget, the 269,752. Is that the total amount?
It'll be that 217.
Oh, 217.
Plus the increments, which is zeros being funded for increments, and then your medical, then your subsection 2, which is power, medical and dental insurance, and on page 21, your total then of that is $1,560.
So what would the total be? overall total?
Oh, I'm sorry, 2.7. 2.7, yeah. And that'll be, I'm hoping that there'll be some arithmetic changes in here, but we'll make those changes. We'll get
So
a
we should take the
motion, I guess, at the end.
217 and the 1560, add those two up?
And the 1,200. And the
That's the
1,200.
way they've been laid out. All throughout the bill, in the different departments and agencies, when they're broken down, you'll see the object classification. Then you'll see increments are broken out and in a separate appropriation or separate line item. Then you'll see these cost centers for water, power, medical, dental, and insurance. And so you would take the top line and just add those different subsections, and that'll give you the total budget for that department or agency. Senator,
Just,
wait. Madam Speaker,
just
are
a
you-
point of information or a clarification. You take the total at 217,760, but you also have the appropriation class for the utility section
Right.
and the medical and dental, which would add to, like for the power is 1,200,
Right.
and then for the medical and dental insurance it's 1,560, which would bring a total sum of the 217,760 plus the two added items, right?
Yes.
So that total on page 21, if I can, I guess, move for technical corrections there. So it would be 2760, right?
Yes.
Right?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So on that
Thank
motion
you.
to make that correction, no objections, that motion is, Madam Speaker, will you,
My concern is I just wanted to make sure that they have, the adequate personnel, because there's been, some problems, I understand, just now even starting up. And for, how about equipment? They didn't ask for computers or anything?
no.
Because that was a concern that they had just relayed to my office, that they don't have computers, they're actually using their own personal computers. Do you know what it was listed in miscellaneous, maybe the breakdown of their miscellaneous?
We have that information, it's outside with my staff, I don't have it readily available with me. I don't like that category.
Can we look at that? I mean, I know the Vice Speaker is
But-
raising his hand, he's probably speaking to the Executive Director right now.
By the way, I just wanted to also inform you that in each of these, the budget submitted with a lot of the backup documents are also outside with my staff. So if you're looking ahead and you had a question,
Okay.
we can find that information readily available for you with the staff outside, because all of those budget submissions are outside with the details. So, Madam Speaker, we just send my staff out there. You know, we
Okay.
have a working meeting with the Codell delegation at 12:30. And so if the body may wish to just take a short break then and recess until a certain time to return while we correct that. Till 2 o'clock? Let's finish it. It's that, so we'll, what time do we want to return? 2? 2:30? 2:30? All right. We will be in recess until 2:30 this afternoon, at which time we'll pick up with a discussion on Chapter 2, Part 3, Section 1, the education certification.
What happened is 1,200 is total here.
Yeah.
Correct. So if you take this plus that,
Yeah.
it balances. So this is under, this should